So hello and welcome to LawWiser. We are starting a series on how to think future, dedicated to the startup ecosystem and community. Today I am joined by a special guest, Mahavir Sharma, who is the chairman of TIE Global, and he has been an angel investor for quite some time now. So welcome Mahavir to LawWiser.
Thank you, pleasure.
And I'm also joined by Avimukt, who has been actually at the helm of affairs when a lot of unicorns were being born. So he's got a ringside view of, what actually happens and how things pan out in a longer run, particularly from legal standpoint. So Avimukt's inputs would be absolutely important and vital for the community. So Avimukt, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking out time today.
Thank you, Aman. Thank you.
Okay, so let me start with Mahavir. Mahavir, you've been actually, TIE is actually all about entrepreneurship, and it's been mentoring, entrepreneurs of all ages. And at the same time, you also have been an angel investor for quite some time. You have founded RAIN in Jaipur. And I think, a lot of people are now associated and looking up to TIE for the guidance. So my first question to you now is that if somebody is looking to start their entrepreneurial journey now, what is your advice to you, given the pandemic situation that we are in and we are slowly trying to come out of it?
So my advice wouldn't be much different except for the fact that you should be COVID-proof. In the sense, travel is not required and work from home is possible for whatever startup you're doing, and your scalability should not be dependent on things where your commuting is hampered. That's one thing. But otherwise, quite honestly, things have not changed. For the last couple of years, funding was more bottom line than top line. Sectors that were burning a lot of money and just working on numbers were not lucrative for angels. We were always looking for things that were revenue positive in a few 2 to 3 years. And we were investing more in teams, we were investing more in technology. I don't think that has changed. Certain sectors, of course, no one would be investing in unless you disrupt what has caused the disruption. Those sectors haven't come across. But I think those are important, will not change. Another thing that has changed is environment, the fact that social impact because of various reasons is become a critical part. So all these things have changed, but more or less, basically, the process of starting or being an entrepreneur does not change as much as it should have, because I think we will go back to you getting used to this normal life sooner or later.
So, so the thing is that, considering the economy is limping at this point of time, do you think that there is a lot of scope for the new entrepreneur, or this is probably the right time for new entrepreneurs to come out?
So, yeah. So I think for a new entrepreneur, to having known the fact that this can also happen, if they can pace themselves and work towards a 9 months to a year of situation where they can now have POC, have the product or service ready, have validation, have some revenue paying customers, I think it is the right time. Unfortunately, for people who started last year, where they were now entering to get funding post the POC, it's tough for them right now. Or for people who had sectors who were dependent on all these things are going to be suffering. Otherwise, if you're starting now, I think it's a very good time. I think not only will you be realistic, you have assessed what could happen, what is the worst possible scenario, and I think you will be more adept and more ready for what should have happened or should happen, I think.
Okay, that's very good to hear. That's a very positive word that is coming out at this point of a time. So I turn to Avimukt now, because, I have a question that, as I said, that you've been actually at the helm of affairs when a lot of unicorns were being born. But there are some very basic and fundamental issues that are to be thought about. And, what should actually, when somebody is forming a new venture, what should be the legal structure, like for example, for it to be a compliance friendly, tax friendly, it takes care of the liabilities of the founders, and ultimately, it is investor friendly as well. What would be your advice on this?
Yeah, thanks, Aman. So I'll just get one aspect about the COVID situation out of the way, because we've been working with various government ministries and stakeholder groups to discuss how startups can be helped during this time. Now, the government through SIDBI came out with some kind of venture debt proposal. But one of the issues that the government faces with startups is their high risk of failure. So unlike helping a mom and pop store, which is like a lifestyle business, in a startup, the philosophy is go big or go home. So on that basis, understandably, the government, while it has done a lot of relaxations in the corporate laws and tax laws, they're finding it hard to give targeted subsidies in the same way that they historically found it hard to do financing of startups. So that is one issue. And I think, as Mahavir rightly said, if you started up last year, you are in a lot of problem right now, because a lot of startups work on a cash flow negative basis in the initial runway, and they find it even harder to try to ensure that when suddenly your customers dry up, it becomes much harder. But in terms of legal form, we always recommend setting up as a company. There are other legal forms available, of course, such as a limited liability partnership, or indeed even an unincorporated partnership. But investors don't like it. A private company gives investors as well as lenders some amount of transparency as to your affairs. They have access to a balance sheet, they have access to your governance documents, and they generally prefer a scenario where there is a statutory audit being done every year. So that reduces somewhat the diligence burden of your investors and of your lenders. So we generally recommend companies to set up as or businesses to incorporate if they are not incorporated yet, and to make sure that all the key assets are housed inside the company. So often I find, and it's understandable again, startup founders, the domain name of the website, that key element of intellectual property is in the name of the founder, not in the name, and this happens to most of us. But the idea is that it should be in the name of the company, because now that the investor is coming in, they want to see all the assets secured and under that house of the company. So we help them in housing that. So whether we are acting on behalf of the investors or on behalf of the founders, our primary aim is to make sure that the house in which the business is neat and clean, and it is a secure house.
Okay, and in fact, the question that you raised about the funding, in fact, on that, I wanted to actually come back to both of you that as an investor, Mahavir, what do you look at in a company when you're actually looking to invest in them? What actually turns you on, and what makes you take the positive decision about investing?
Well, I mean, when we, are investing in a company, we look at it from many angles. We actually become very, very harsh in terms of analyzing, what is going on in the company, what is the team about, competition, growth pattern, past history. I mean, we do a lot of due diligence. I mean, and it's not just the product or the service that they're offering, but about the team also. About their tenacity, about what they are offering, then financial due diligence, customer validation. All these things are, actually pretty standard that are being done by us, and which we do very, very carefully. The only thing that I feel as an investor, sometimes it works for you, sometimes it doesn't work for you. You've burnt your individual angel investors differ on what's happening across various sectors. So if I've lost money in, let's say, e-commerce, I say, yeah, e-commerce, I don't want to get into it. And that's very, very subjective or very personal. But otherwise, I think pretty much understanding the team, the problem, the solution, and the prospect of in that sector are a key to the success, or are looking at an investment. Of course, later on, valuations, terms, term sheets and SHAs come into play, which are very, very critical because we have to safeguard not only us, but people who are co-investing with us, so that we are in the right process or right direction. So scalability, the fact that it is disrupting the market, the competition is not overly funded. Is there a pivot possible by the competition? Multiple things are looked at it.
Okay. And in fact, one of the things that is going to resolve the issue of trust between the founder and the investor, and between the founders, what are the legal things that you can do at the time of like setting up company Avimukt that is for you?
Yeah. I think trust is a very interesting aspect and word. So there are two kinds of founders that I have come across. So one kind of founder is somebody who met a co-founder in a hostel or sometimes in school, and they pretty much hit it off very early in time, right? And founders generally they come together through mutual friends. They have a lot of connects. So in those kind of companies, it is a very sensitive discussion, something like a prenuptial agreement, to bring up, let's have like a founders agreement before you even go out for funding. So a lot of founders let the investor decide, right? So they put the gun on the investor's shoulder, because remember, an investor is also something like a human resource expert. I've never met a VC who is more into Excel sheets and less into people. They're all, as Mahavir is smiling, and indeed, he's a people person. So they are the people who try to make sure that if a key man event occurs, that will be something where their investment is safe. And most key people like to leave it to them. But these days we have this concept of a serial entrepreneur. You would have come across a lot of 30-somethings where they've already done one business and sold it successfully or maybe unsuccessfully, and have had a lot of learnings. They have actually been in bed with founders, and now, so again, the crude analogy of a marriage, they are now on their second marriage. At that time, they expect their lawyers to draft up shareholders agreement, because they have had learnings. They have seen how shareholders who are founders have taken advantage of each other. They have seen that, there's a phrase in the industry that you often hit the ceiling, right? So you were a great engineer, but as the company moved to a Series B financing, suddenly you found that, your co-founder may have been a gold medalist from IIT, but he doesn't understand anything about business. And that's when, those learnings, the next business, you want there to be escape clauses. So typically we find in almost all agreements a concept where there is a vesting. So even though they're your shares, there's a clawback that is there in case you don't spend that necessary 4 years or 5 years in the company. And the focus becomes that you don't really own the company, you own a right to be in the company. So again, so it's almost as if you have a lot of skin in the game, but you will leave those shares behind if suddenly the board or the investors start to feel a discomfort with you. There is no entitlement. So that is something which, as lawyers, whether you are representing the investors or the company, you are supposed to make sure that you secure it. And one word of advice to founders based on that movie, and it's so true, that movie Social Network, where one of the co-founders was negotiating his shareholders agreement, and he had a lot of trust in the lawyers. And later on, when he lawyers, why did you not protect me? They said that we were lawyers for the company, we were not your lawyers, right? So that is one of the obligations that we have as company counsel, to make sure that the entire cap table is secure and not just any particular shareholder.
So I'd just like to add something, Aman, to what Avimukt has said, and he took the analogy of a marriage. When I look at investors, and I did say we do a full due diligence on the team in terms of their abilities and their strengths, I always tell them, see, we don't go just for the money from an investor. Make sure you did not have a choice when you were choosing your parents, but now as an investor or a mentor on board someone, you really have to be very, very, critical and do a full due diligence about that person's track record. How has he or she fared with other companies that he or she has invested in? Is it hands-on? Is it a soft hand? All these things are very, very critical. And, in the short run, everything works. But when things get tough, and as Avimukt said, a co-founder does not understand Series B, it's very important that there is truce, and the cap table people, the early investors would help in, bringing sanity to a chaos, I feel.
Now, in fact, Mahavir, TIE Global is actually mentoring children as young as they are in high school. So how basically you are cultivating the culture of entrepreneurship in India, and how do you think it is going to go now?
So mentoring as a TIEs format is a very, very proven thing. We start very early. We start from schools, middle school to high school. We do business plan competitions. We do pitching. We do mentoring. Our tone and our conversations are much different when we are talking to them. Our questions are leading questions, kind of telling them what direction they should be going, but let them answer. Unlike when we are investing, our questions are very sharp, very to the point, sometimes even, giving them something that, they would find odd to deal with. But when we are mentoring, it's very different. And TIE's format, starting from schools, we have college or TIE university program, where we do all of that. Now the Angel program that TIE is launching, so we will be investing in college startups or post-college startups. And I think all that is something very, very close to TIE, and it leads into early stage, idea stage, seed investment, which is our Angels program. So we feel that the future of any country or the growth of any country lies in startups. It lies in technologies. It lies in entrepreneurship, which can create jobs. And I personally feel that India is the helm of it, and India has a great future. And so we are doing whatever best we can do across sectors, across ages.
Thank you so much, Mahavir. Any closing remarks, Avimukt?
I'd just like to close by saying that this is a good initiative that you've taken to have podcasts.
Thank you so much, Avimukt. Thank you so much, Mahavir. It was lovely
Pleasure.
having
Thank
you
you.
over
Thank you.
on this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.